You've had people helping interpreting for you, and you must have learned a lot about peace from the Japanese as well.
Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, I went over there with a very narrow understanding of what wars were wrong. And I've spent a lot of time learning and listening in Japan. You know, I think that, like, it's a wonderful thing to be able to listen to people from a different culture that have a different way of understanding things. And getting together with them and having these discussions really advanced my understanding of where I stood. You know, it's one thing to learn from people that have in the same town or just the same culture as you, but you can also have these dualities of reality, you know, like in Japan, they talk about the emperor saving Japan from a third atomic bomb, you know. By signing the peace deal with the United States, the emperor stopped a third atomic bomb, and so he was considered a hero. You know, he wasn't the one that started the war and caused the two bombs to drop in the first place. No. That's the American side of the story. You know, the Japanese is that they were the victims of the atomic bomb, and the emperor saved them from a third one. And also in America, we teach that, like, you know, we used the atomic bombs to save American lives, but the war was already completely over at that point when we dropped those bombs, and Japan had no ability to cause any death on the Americans. They're an island nation. They had already asked for peace from their generals had already asked for peace, and we dropped those atomic bombs. And that was really arguably just a snub at the Russians and for the Cold War that was just starting off. It had nothing to do with saving American lives or the Japanese lives. No, that's just how we legitimize it.
Is some of this history, is this from the peacemakers that you've met along the way that you learned it?
Yeah. So there's one image of a guy that it's titled Kichikabe. It's an old World War II veteran, and his hands are on his hips, and he's looking at the camera. It was really interesting is he's a World War II veteran that hadn't seen an American since he fought the Americans in Okinawa. He hadn't seen an American until he saw me. And so the last American he saw was an American soldier, and he sees an American soldier again. And I think it was his daughter and son had organized an event for me in their town. And through the event, I didn't know this man was a veteran. And after the event, we're sitting down and having a little dinner together. And he starts talking to me, and, you know, I'm waiting for the translation. And what he says is that I'm the nicest Kichikabe he's ever met.
The nicest white devil?
So he said that I'm the nicest white devil. And we all got a good laugh out of it. I've been working for peace for about 10 years now, not even 10 years. And I've got so much to learn from these people that have been thinking about peace for a lot longer. In Japan, I've been really fortunate. I'd say I've been really fortunate in all my life, actually. But in Japan specifically, I've been fortunate to meet some people that have really been thinking about peace for a long time. There's a younger monk who's standing in front of a balcony, Teirada Shoni. And there's a lot of different venues or avenues of peace that people are thinking about. And one of his, Teirada's, Shoni's peacemaking is to bring in families that are having problems having babies, and they have this temple where it's supposed to help procreation happen. And so he sees it as like this service to the community. So Teirada it's interesting, he's got his prayer beads around his neck. And what I've noticed is everywhere I go in every culture, people have these same prayer beads. And so just like the Muslims that I saw in Iraq, they're counting the prayer beads as he walked. When I was walking with Teirada, he always had those prayer beads in his hand, and he'd be saying a prayer as he's walking. And I think that, like, the spiritual prayer for peace is really important, and it's a very wholesome aspect of peacemaking. The young man standing with a dragon tattoo lives on a hippie commune on Shiroshima Island, and they do all organic vegetable farming, and they also do comedy there. The main organizer used to be a comedian on public television, and he's pretty funny. And so they have this great community where it's based on laughter. And they do so much laughter there. And everything is really funny, but they grow food. So you'll see the image of there's a woman in a canoe out in the tropical area, and that's in Okinawa. That's in northern Okinawa, where they're planning on moving the Futenma Air Base. And that place that we're out on the water is a coral reef where the dugong lives, and that's the Japanese manatee. And it's an endangered animal, the World Heritage Site. These reefs are a World Heritage Site. You're not allowed to destroy them. But the U.S. wants to fill in this reef so they can build an air base there, so they can land their planes on the reef. So for the last 14 years, the U.S. has been trying to build up this air base in Henoko, and the people there have been protesting it ever since. So one of the things that the U.S. did was get a construction company to put in some scaffolding out in the middle of the coral reef so that they can lay down concrete pads and start filling it in. And the protesters started occupying the scaffolding structures. And they occupied them for all day for, I think it was about 10 years, every day for 10 years, until the scaffolding started to rust. And then because of the, basically OSHA standards or safety standards, the government had to come in and remove those structures. And so in Henoko, we actually saw the will of the people outlast steel, which was really interesting and really a really powerful place. The town up there has gathered together, and they watch where the U.S. is trying to build these bases, and they set up like a little camp, and just to be a witness, They just want to see what's going on. And at the behest of the U.S. military and the U.S. government, Japan has, the first thing they did was try to convince people not to protest. So if you don't protest, you get a tax break in Henoko, which is really interesting. So there's 3 families that are main protesters, and they don't get the tax break. And so that was for a couple years. Then the government changed its tactics and started suing the protesters for being like on the road or on public land. And in the last lawsuit, which I think was maybe 2013, 2014, they named an entire family, including a 5-year-old girl, in a lawsuit of trespassing on U.S. military grounds. So the Japanese government is suing a 5-year-old for standing outside of these gates, these military gates, and just watching, not occupying, not getting in the road, not getting in anyone's way, but just observing. One of the great stories that happened there was that Japan hired a spy to watch these families that was watching the gates, but he was an Okinawan. So he got paid for 2 years to hang out with the protesters, and he didn't want the base to go in either, but he also wanted a job. So what he did with his time is he made forts for the kids that would come and play, and of the families that were protesting. And it took the government a couple years to realize that he was, I don't know what you say, double agent, not really helping them at all. So the next image is of 5 women in Okinawa during Okinawa Days, it's a big festival, but it's a really sad memorial. Okinawa Days is about the anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Okinawa, where the Japanese were telling the Okinawans that it was better for them to die than to be captured by the Americans. And so the Okinawans, at the behest of Japan, committed mass suicide. They had these family grenades that they would call them, where the family would crowd around a grenade to save on grenades. And then there was also, where this event is these big cliffs where I don't know how many thousand of Okinawans jumped to their death at the behest of the Japanese to avoid U.S. capture. And so these women are getting ready to perform and to memorialize the thousands and thousands dead before the American invasion. Oh, this image is of someone on the Peace Walk, and he was a really nice guy, and we were talking a little bit, and he ended up getting some of the biggest blisters on his feet that I'd ever seen anyone in my life. And, being a combat lifesaver in Iraq, I took care of a lot of people's feet, and I saw a lot of nasty stuff. So during the 1,000-mile peace walk, I was volunteering to help with people's feet, and when he took off his shoes, he kept saying like, "Oh, maybe I'll go home for like a couple days and get better." But he had blisters from the toes to the heel, and I just kept telling him, "No, you need to go home. Maybe go to the hospital. You're not going to be coming back anytime soon." But what was interesting about the peace walk, and this is the first action that I had done for peace that was really heartfelt, was that people really wanted to come back, and they would quit their jobs and they would come back on the peace walk. Or they'd go home, and then, as they were leaving, they were saying goodbye to everyone, and, maybe we'll write in 5 years and still be friends or whatever. But then like 2 days later, they'd say, "I went home, I went to my job, and it just was so meaningless, and I wanted to be here, so I quit." And they'd come back for the last month of the peace walk or the last 2 weeks of the peace walk. And so he was one of those people that you could see that the peace walk had really invigorated him. And walking through all these towns, smiling and enjoying ourselves gave a great image of peace to the people that were in their offices. I just remember so many people coming and I was like a bug, or they just get addicted, and I was the same way, I couldn't understand why some days, like one day we had to take a train because we didn't have a stay place, and we had to take a train back to a previous stay place, and I was like, I came here to walk, The logistics had, not really caught up to me at that point. I hadn't figured that out yet, but...
So I think that concludes our visit to Japan as part of this, but there's a lot more artwork that you've done, Ash. Since we've run out of time on air here, here's what I'm going to do, folks. I'm going to continue talking to Ash, and we'll put up with images on YouTube. Look for the second link that you'll find out on northernspiritradio.org, and you can travel with us a little bit further through Ash's healing artwork and his peace work